Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 745 with our review of The Creator. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we are coming together for the latest film from Gareth Edwards. We are talking about The Creator. Lots of excitement leading into sitting down to watch this film. This is one of the rare times that Stephen and I actually sat next to each other in the theater, which we totally forgot that was even going to happen.
Yeah, we either planned and forgot or didn't plan, but we both liked the exact same seats at the Alamo. Either way, I was surprised when I looked at the booking and I was like, oh, damn it, it's a full showing. I wonder who I'm going to get stuck next to. I hope they're not like super loud. And then I walk in and I see Christopher with his big bowl of popcorn, and it was a cute moment.
So yeah, as we said, this is one of the rare times that we both sat together to watch this film. This is one of the rare days that we both worked from the office today at the same time. So I'm just seeing Stephen all over the place before coming down here.
I know. I did sell my likeness, by the way, through San Francisco. So you've been seeing all sorts of me. Alamo is going to be full of me pretty soon.
I've no doubt about that. But yeah, Stephen, it's been a long day. You ready to get into what may or may not turn out to be a very long review?
Let's dive in.
All right. Okay. We are going to play the trailer for The Creator, and then we're going to come back and give everybody a probably very lively review.
When the war started, they protected me. Took better care of me than humans would have.
They're not people, Maya. It's just programming.
10 years ago today, the artificial intelligence created to protect us detonated a nuclear warhead in Los Angeles. This is a fight for our very existence.
Sergeant Taylor, we are this close to winning the war. But the AI are developing a super weapon. Retrieve it, or they win.
Locate the weapon.
Yeah, it's just a kid.
Are you going to heaven?
No. You gotta be a good person to go to heaven.
So, we're the same. We can't go to heaven because you're not good. And I'm not a person.
Do you have any idea what the thing is?
She looks like a little girl now, but she's growing. Whoever has that kid wins the war.
Whose side do you want, huh?
What do you want, sweetie?
For robots to be free.
Oh, we don't have that in the fridge. How about ice cream?
All right, so that was the trailer for The Creator. Reading the description from IMDb, against the backdrop of a war between humans and robots with artificial intelligence, a former soldier finds the secret weapon, a robot in the form of a young child. Stephen Miller, what did you think of The Creator?
I have not been this conflicted about my feelings on a movie in a while, at least in terms of a big kind of spectacle-driven movie, because this looks fantastic. It looks incredible. It is an $80 million budget. It looks better than most $200+ million budget movies that have come out in the last many, many, many years. It has this kind of like tactile use of CG that I feel like when District 9 came out, that was the future. We were like, holy shit, this is what you can do. You don't need a mega budget to make it look amazing, to make it look very physical, to make it look like these things are actually with you. And then since District 9, I haven't actually seen a whole lot of people try to follow up and make that thing. And this is really fulfilling that promise. Like, this is a movie that blows that up to epic proportions and keeps a very, 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 for my money, realistic look and feel that is clearly full of CG just by nature of the story it's telling, but it never feels that way at all, at least to me. It feels very, very real. I mean, it has the, like, somber, bleak look and feel of, like, a Vietnam War movie or something like that. Like, and it is combining this kind of heady sci-fi with rugged, emotional angst, and it just visually pulls it off because it looks completely believable. And I think that is incredible. I mean, when I think about the visuals, I think of my favorite sci-fis of the last decade, like Arrival, Ex Machina, Ad Astra, like movies that just, like, they're about sci-fi, but you aren't thinking of it as being a CG fest, so you're really able to, like, zoom in and think about the emotional meaning of the characters. And I love that so much. I want every movie to look like this. And that was true for the entire movie. I was always visually in awe of what the movie was doing. But when I also compare it to those movies, Arrival, Ex Machina, Ad Astra, there are emotional elements that those movies had with their kind of main characters and the brooding and the philosophy that it was wrestling with, that this just doesn't have at all. This movie, character-wise, feels like a sketch of a movie. It feels like one of those yada, 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 have you seen a movie? Well, you probably know what we're going to do with this character movies. And then tied with that, the story I thought was very underbaked. Again, we can probably, in spoilers, dive into all sorts of things that feel like plot holes or things that were missing in the narrative. And then even the world, this world that is so visually perfectly built out. Like, in terms of aesthetics, I think the world building is fantastic in this movie. In terms of me thinking about it for more than 2 minutes, I think the world building doesn't work in the movie at all. And I'm torn between the part of me that cares about that stuff and the part of me that couldn't care less because it is a beautiful looking way to spend 2+ hours. And I think I'm just left feeling frustrated because it looked and felt so good. I don't think the bar was that high for the story to be something that I would just love. And the fact that it failed that bar and leaves me nitpicking and feeling frustrated, I don't know. I don't know what to do with the movie. I honestly don't understand why the story is this underbaked. But before I go into details, I guess I want to lob it over to you to see how close are we? How far away are we? How much is this going to be an argument?
It's not going to be an argument. I mean, everything that you've said so far is spot on, 100% true. This film looks amazing. I loved every second of visually interpreting the photons bouncing off the screen and hitting my eyes, right? Like, that experience, seeing what is being presented, is amazing. This film feels like somebody like found a treasure trove of, like, a bunch of concept art for this cool futuristic world and just brought that to the screen in a way that feels grounded and real, even though it's clearly super fantastical because we don't have machines running around and stuff like that. But outside of that, this film feels like, you know, maybe the main character of this film would think the film didn't have a soul because they would believe it was just a construct and not real, right? Because this film is lacking so much in any actual substance. It's all visual spectacle, and that spectacle is firing on all levels. Nothing else looks as good. It looks amazing. You take like one shot from every scene, and I just want that as like plastered on my wall or something, right? Like, it's just a really, really beautiful, awesome representation of this world. But then literally everything about it, if you take 2 seconds to think about, you're just like, I get why this visually looks cool, but it doesn't make sense. I'll pick something that's completely unrelated to any story just to illustrate the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And this is such a silly nitpick, but it's imagine that, but extrapolated through the entire story into everything. In this film, there are, I'm going to call them boats, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. There is a boat, which is the thing that hovers on top of water, but then still has kind of a sail. So it's basically, it's like, in like old Star Wars films where it's like clearly a car and they're just like, they rub like the grease on the glass over the lens and like cover up the tires so that it looks like it's like floating or whatever. it feels like they just have like an actual boat on water, and then the bottom half of the boat is CG to be floating above the water. It's like, if you have a thing that can fly, just fly. Why are you hovering above the water? Like, I get that it looks kind of cool, but like, who in this world made this craft? Because what was its purpose and why was it designed that way? Can it also hover above land, or can it only hover above water? What is the technology here? It seems like there's a lot of stuff that went from concept art to live production version in the film without an actual path to get there and a reason for being. I think this film, honestly, one of the silly things that kind of bugs me about this film is the opening title card where it explains what Nirmata is, right? It gives us two definitions. One is the actual definition of the word, which is just the translation of the word creator, which we're watching a film called The Creator, and it opens with the title card that says this word Nirmata means creator. Cool, I'm fine with that. But then it also gives like another meaning, which it sounds, I forget the exact way it described it, but it was something like, it's a word that like humans use to refer to this deity that machine AI worships. And I was like, okay, is that going to be important to the story at all? I'm pretty sure that when we're introduced to Nirmata, nobody worships this person or being. It's purely, this is a being who does a thing, right? It's like it shows us two definitions and only one of the definitions applies, and the other definition is like setting.
We can talk in spoilers because there is worship of Nirmata in this movie that we can get to.
I feel like that's a revisionist definite. Like, it feel not you. You're not the revisionist in this case. I mean,
I think someone else to worship Nirmata is what you're talking about.
It's like Nirmata wasn't being worshipped until a certain event takes place, and then there is sort of it's a prolonging. We'll get into it in spoilers. But I think that secondary definition comes in so long after the fact that it kind of doesn't mean anything, and just makes me go like, why is that even part of the story? This feels super weird. It's because they want this visual and the feeling of this deity being, but it doesn't actually apply to the world that we're participating in. Let me say a few positive things, and I can lob back to you at any point, so just give me the signal. But I want to say a few positive things besides it's just beautiful. Which I'm gonna backdoor my way in through a negative comment again.
Great.
John David Washington's character, like every other line out of his mouth is, they're not real. They're not real. And it's like, we get it. You don't believe that machine AI is real. We get it. You don't have to lean on it so hard. So when the film starts and he keeps talking about how they're not real, they're not important, they're not living beings, we hate them. Given that I've watched the trailer and I knew he was going to encounter a machine child later, I was like, man, if you're being sent to kill this child and then you won't kill them because they're a child, this is not going to work for how anti-machine you are for the first 5 minutes of this film. Like, I'm not going to buy this transition. And to the film's credit, this isn't I refuse to kill a machine kid. Now I'm running from the people who were on my team. This is I need this machine kid for a very specific reason, and I'm begrudgingly putting up with the existence of this kid until I can maybe potentially achieve. So at least I was like, okay, so you're not establishing this weird hate. But then on top of that, another thing that I didn't like is John David Washington's character is basically a cyborg. He's an ex-soldier who's had enough of his body replaced that I feel like you can't be that anti-machine. Right? Like, I feel like there's a little... Sure. I don't understand how you can hate machines.
It stems from a very obvious premise, and the obviousness is what annoys me, which is the obvious premise is people think AI isn't real, but at what level of complexity, at what Turing test definition do they become real? And that is like, it is so obvious that they need to do more with it for me to believe that a person living in that world is actually that dense, right? And I think that's the problem, is that is the conflict at the heart of the film, and it is such a kind of obvious and overdone conflict. We as viewers don't buy it, basically.
Yeah. And that was kind of the whole, I know you weren't a fan of Westworld in the way that I was a fan of Westworld, but like, whether or not you think it's cliche, like, the whole point of that is not can a machine be alive? The point of it was, well, if you can't tell the difference, does it matter whether or not they're alive? And I think that's one of the most entertaining ways to talk about AI is not, is it actually sentient? Is it actually alive? But like, to me, if you're somebody like, even in a world where you know 100% that they are not real, right? If you're just going on a murder spree, killing things that are pretending to be alive, that still also does something to you, right? Like, I feel like being like, if something is play acting as suffering, if you're okay with that, you can't just tell yourself it's not alive, it's fine, because you are experiencing the same thing you would experience if you didn't know that it was. So it's like if somebody was dressed as a machine.
You're Joe Pantoliano eating the steak in The Matrix, basically. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But in that one, he was going to be fully ignorant, right? Not ignorant. Yeah. His ignorance is bliss was going to actually work for him because he was going to buy into it. In this world, it's like, if you're just killing stuff that you are telling yourself are machines, then like what is going on there, right? Like I feel like there's still meaning to treating another thing as human, whether or not you fully 100% believe it's human. And this film doesn't ever feel like it's willing to like adopt a real thought experiment there on what that means. It's just one person who's so anti-machine that he's like, hey, nothing, no matter how realistic they are, is ever a machine. Fuck them all. Let's kill them all. They all need to die. And I get, he lived through ground zero of this explosion that happened. Sure, fine. I get it. You really, really hate machines because, potentially a lot of people died and you're sad about it. Mm-hmm. But it just felt like there was this weird disconnect of actually wanting to have that conversation. On the other side of it, I did actually appreciate this kind of concept that, like, we've seen lots of films where society is split, right? You have some parts of society that are like, yeah, machines are great. We love them. They should be a part of our society. Respect droids. It's kind of like a thing where people buy into it. And then you have other parts of society that are like, no, we hate this. People within one community can war against each other in that, are you a supporter? Are you a hater? Do you break machines? Do you try to keep them going? I feel like, and maybe I'm forgetting other films that do this, but I feel like this is a very, very interesting concept they wanted to throw out about the idea of warring factions on Earth, one that supports and one that doesn't. So two superpowers in the world of, whatever the U.S. is here, and then New Asia, where New Asia is accepting of machine AI and making them part of their society and living cohesively with them. Meanwhile, the United States is trying to wage war, not against New Asia, but specifically against the AI group that is living in New Asia. Great concept. Right. The problem is this film completely ignores the geopolitical impact of United States waging a war against another country, but trying to toe the line between, like, no, we're not actually attacking New Asia. We're attacking the people hiding in New Asia. And, like, there's never a conversation about, like, what that means for two superpowers engaged in this sort of conflict. It's always it's just machines.
This is where my read of the movie wasn't that two superpowers were engaged in a conflict. My read of the movie was very political, of America, or whatever is coded as America, is the imperialist power, and they are pulling we're at war with the Viet Cong, not with Vietnam, or we're at war with, terrorists, we're not at war with Iraq, and they are steamrolling over a community that is a one-way fight, basically. That is the way that I interpreted the world of this movie, is that it was entirely propaganda, and the only thing keeping them from just crushing everyone was some public opinion back at home that made them have to, like, put it under the subterfuge of them rooting out a threat. That was kind of how I read it. So much that I thought the metaphor was laid on way too thick, and frankly not the story didn't pay off that thick a metaphor.
No, like, and like we both agree on that point. But to me, New Asia is a large group, and we're seeing incursions into a small part of New Asia. So in my head, I would assume that other parts of New Asia would not like that happening. And in this future, where there's a giant doomsday device floating over the planet, that the war wouldn't just be like, oh, come on in and kill whoever you want, that there would be more of a pushback. That's kind of what I was thinking, is that, like, I assume there are superpowers in the region. As far as I can tell, the only place a nuke went off was in Los Angeles. Right? So it just seems like there would be other people in the region who would want to stop the United States from doing their wars anywhere in the territory.
Yeah, in my headcanon, the U.S. is a hegemonic state that is essentially the global power, and everything else is dispersed, and there is no other superpower in this future. But another thing, speaking of the world building, if I can nitpick again, or maybe my own mind was just in the wrong place when I started watching this movie. This movie opens with archival footage of, you know, the AI future is bright. Look at how simulants are being built that are going to walk among us and have human-like powers. Isn't this great? And then cut to the nuclear bomb going off in LA. The way that was presented, at least to me, looked retro. It felt like it was telling me something that happened in like the 60s or whatever, just in like the way the broadcast was framed, the way a press room is being shown, and it seemed like kind of grainy video footage, like something that happened a long time ago. And then it turns out in this world that happened in 2055. And there's something right off the bat that I'm fine with this being an entirely fake universe. You know, this could be a Blade Runner type situation. Who cares what year it is? But there's just something right off the bat where I was kind of discombobulated and not sure how much to put geopolitics as I know them into this movie versus imagine we are in Halo or something, like we're in just an entirely different world that happens to be called Earth. Off the bat, I was a little confused. Again, visually, I liked it. It was jarring. It was interesting starting with that retro feeling and then nuclear war and then cutting to this very somber modern day. But in terms of the actual world building, I feel like I don't understand how that world, like what the rules of that world are. So it was hard for me to even answer your question. I don't know if there are multiple superpowers or only America, which would be fine. Again, I'm totally fine with a character-driven, moody sci-fi where the world is happening in the periphery and we don't ask a lot of questions. But I like John David Washington just fine, you know, but his character is a total blank slate in this movie. He cannot emotionally carry a movie without having a world. Like, his point in this movie is the philosophy of the world, and he is like a representative of those warring philosophies. And the fact that I don't understand the world that it created really, really, really makes it hard to become emotionally invested in what happens to him.
Yeah.
Can I ask a nitpick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my nitpick comes down to how these AIs work, simulants. You were talking about boats, right? And how there's a boat that can technically fly, and yet it's just a boat.
Yeah.
AIs, we all know how AI and robotics works in, you know, broad strokes. You know, it's a machine. It's a machine, and it has some kind of neural network type brain. And in this case, they've replicated the brain of a person, and so it's going to have the capabilities of that person. A character early on surprises an AI by choking it to death. Why would you design your AI so that it needs to breathe through an airway, and when it is in the process of not breathing, it is losing consciousness and unable to fight back?
So Steven, first I'm going to double down for you, and then second, I'm going to do backflips to explain it in a way that I do not believe, but it's the only thing that satisfies both of our complaints.
I love it. I'm excited for the gymnastic feat you're about to pull off.
So I also had a similar complaint, which is like, I was watching the film, and one of the things I kept thinking to myself is like, if everybody believes machines are alive, why do the machines want to look more human? Like, what is the point of looking like a human if you believe that there's nothing about being human that makes you more human than just being sentient? And on top of that, even if I forgive that and say like, well, you just want to look human, how come all the machines, they only get to look human in the face and the back of their head gets to be a machine so that everyone else knows they're not human? That felt like a double standard. But there's this moment where you see an ad playing on TV where it says, donate your likeness, show your support for the machines. And I was like, okay, cool. So in this universe, it's like a solidarity thing. Like, hey, you can take my, because that's the thing too, is I was like, they're AI. They could procedurally generate unlimited faces and no machine would look the same. You could have your own bespoke personal identity. So I kept thinking like, why do you need to take someone's face when you can have any face that's never existed before because you can have all these permutations? And then I was like, okay.
I have a double backflip answer for that, and maybe you have the same answer. My double backflip is that the world that they live in right now, it is not that AI as a field has progressed so incredibly that we have learned how to synthesize consciousness. It is more that the raw materials were built and they learned how to transport from, wet matter to digital. And so in this world, the only way to get this kind of advanced human-like AI, as opposed to the more coarse droid type of AI that fight for the imperialists, is to literally transplant from a human being whatever the state of their brain and motor functions and everything was onto a robot. That is my double backflip, and I kind of think that is what the movie wants you to believe because, and I won't go into spoilers yet, the idea of a different way of doing things, something that might grow and change and be different, is treated as like a novel, amazing breakthrough that didn't exist before. So I feel like in this movie, it isn't just the face is being donated. It's that it actually needs a human brain, a human identity in order to create a real working AI with that level of capability. It still doesn't tell me why you can choke them.
Sorry. Now I remember it. It's the choking thing which keyed me off. I remember it now. So when we get into spoilers, we'll talk about that, and I'll tell you why I don't think that's the way it works. Now I remember. Yeah. Now I remember why it is. This is the double backflip. The machines so want to be alive that the ability to die is inherently human, and they design their own systems to, like, the whole, because we'll get into this one of my other biggest complaints is why no AI have fucking backups in this world. Like, this is a world where you're a completely artificial being. Even if you're sentient, you should be able to back up your consciousness. They literally introduce consciousness transfer in this film. And it's just a thing where it's like, you should be able to back yourself up. I think that the way they try to be alive is to be one body, one consciousness, susceptible to dying in bunch of different ways. Like that is the way they achieve more aliveness, is by adding the ability to die, because otherwise they should be able to just live forever. The body gets destroyed a little bit, swap another body, just transfer your consciousness into that and then go on living. You want to be somebody over here one day, you want to be a different type of person over here the other day, do whatever you want, just keep jumping between bodies and everything's fine. Like that's what this universe should allow for in a world where there's completely synthetic beings. But I think they purposely build in the ability to die because that fleeting life actually makes them live more, Stephen. Makes them live for real.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I mean, I know you said it was a double backflip. I appreciate the double backflip. That's fine. To me, what this zooms out is, what's interesting is when I was thinking that we were going to discuss The Creator tonight, it wasn't until a few minutes before recording that it occurred to me that we are talking about an AI movie. Because I don't think this is really very interested or thinking about AI at all. I feel like this movie, it took the concept of AI versus human and then mapped it on to more general stories like Vietnam War era movies or something about oppressed groups of people, and forgot to go back and flesh out the ramifications of what it means that the group that is being oppressed is an AI. Because there's just a lot that is never addressed or even hinted at. Like, what is the benefit of it being an AI? They aren't superpowered, to my knowledge. They aren't extra strong. They can be surprised and choked to death. There's just something about it that I feel like it was there's this grand sci-fi opera or whatever that Gareth Edwards had in mind, and the fact that it's an AI is like the hook but not the meat of it, and that is one of those things that just doesn't feel fleshed out enough in this world.
So as I've been talking about the film so far in this episode, I've been semi-conscious to either call them the machines or machine-powered AI or something, right? Because to me, one of the aggressively stupid things about this film is that any character refers to them as AI. There is no way these soldiers in this world would be like, oh my God, the AI. Hey, dude, Steven, the AI is going to get us. Like, that feels like such a trying to talk to today where like AI is the biggest topic. It just feels like there is no world. Like, in Terminator films, they also refer to them as the machines, right? They're not like sometimes there's a Terminator, right? But it's like robot. I feel like it's when it's robots coming after you, you say robots. You don't say, humanoid, synthetic, AI powered bots are trying to get us. You're like, yeah, these machines, especially if your whole goal is to say they are not human, they are not sentient, they are not alive, they are just fake. You would say, hey, these machines. In Battlestar Galactica, the pejorative for the machines is toasters, right? Like you don't say, oh, those totally alive things over there. Like it feels weird that like every character is saying like capital A, capital I, TM, right? It just, something about it just felt so hokey to me, and I couldn't understand why it was bothering me. I was like, yeah, because why would you call them AI?
Well, speaking of hokey, one thing that I truly can't decide how I feel about this movie is emotionally, this is self-serious. Like, I think emotionally, Ad Astra is the closest to this movie in recent memory, where it feels like one guy's very brooding journey through a lot of really interesting set pieces, but it's really a personal, emotional story, and the person is having trouble connecting with his interior emotionality or whatever. Like, it feels like a heavy, somber movie. And then it's like Chris White's co-writer or someone like did punch up on the script and decided there would be a joke every like 15 minutes in a way that I laughed. I don't know that it's a problem with me. I don't know if I would prefer the movie that doesn't have the jokes, but there were just moments that made me wonder what this movie is trying to be. Like there was a moment where
the dog moment.
I mean, there were a lot. Yeah, the dog moment, or there was a moment where a character is talking to Alfie and goes like, "Oh, what do you want, sweetie?" And she goes, "For robots to be free." And she said, "Oh, we don't have that in the fridge. How about ice cream?" There were things like that kind of periodically where I don't mind it. I think I kind of like it relative to the somber version of this movie, because I think the world building doesn't support a totally somber, serious sci-fi tone. But it just there was a weird clash to me where it felt like this movie did not know what it wanted to be, and I didn't know how to handle some of the hokiness in it.
Yeah, and I think, too, like, it actually works with John David Washington if he's the only one that's cracking jokes, right? Because he is sort of trying to, like, use humor to get through the situation he finds himself in. Not even humor, but, like, sarcasm, right? Like, but when the other, when it's just for the audience, that's when it becomes weird, right? Like, a character can make jokes about their experience, but when the audience is getting stuff just for them, it makes you go like, I mean, I did chuckle, but is that what you wanted to go for in this moment? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, that was my feeling. I laughed at pretty much every, quote, funny moment in this movie, but after the laughter, I thought, was it really worth deflating the tension for that? Like, I kind of liked the tension. It kind of seems like you're trying to go for tension with this movie. So I don't know. It just, again, it feels like the movie didn't really know what it wanted to be and what kind of story it wanted to tell. And that left me feeling a little stranded, but it looked so beautiful the whole way through. I kind of also thought it was great. So I just feel very conflicted about this movie.
Yeah. Man, I'm trying to think of some more things to talk about that bugged me in a pre-spoiler section. There's some visual stuff, once again, that this film is like stuff that looks beautiful, but if you think even for a second, doesn't make any sense. There are tanks that appear in this film that have targeting lasers that can track enemies. And I'm like, yo, if you could track the enemy, why do you also need to use that tracking to hit them with the missiles that you're firing at them? Can't you just fire the missiles directly at them? Like, it's clearly a thing that looks rad as hell, right? When like a bunch of lasers come out and start tracking targets in real time and then missiles fire off and then hit them, it looks so badass. But if you think about it for a second, like in modern day, when soldiers paint a target with a laser, it's because the machine can't do that processing in real life, right? Or even go back to the latest Top Gun film, right? You have two pilots, one that launches the bomb and steers the plane, and one that paints the target with the laser, lines it up so that because the one person can't do both at the same time, right? That's totally fine. In this future, this AI could target whatever the hell it wants. Just fire the missiles directly at the target. Like, we don't need you to visualize it for us, as rad as it is, because it doesn't matter. The enemy deploys, I'm gonna go out of the way and say they're AI-powered weapons at some point in this film. You're waging a war against AI. In what universe would you deploy AI weapons against the AI? Why would those weapons not hurt you?
So this goes back, and we can talk in spoilers maybe a little bit more about my theory, my double backflip that I actually believe, which is there's a fundamental difference in this movie between the intelligence of a standard robot and the intelligence of, what do they call them? Simulants. The intelligence brought about by actually replicating a human being. And in this movie, the former are like servants of the Empire, like droids in Star Wars or something like that. They are like, they're things that they can control that they're not worried about. And nobody thinks those pass the Turing test. And these new things that are actually cloned from human beings are the ones that pass the Turing test. Right. And I feel like this movie wants there to be a hard dividing line between those two. I don't know to what end necessarily, but I feel like it's very intentional.
So you believe that consciousness can only be bootstrapped and can't be created synthetically whole cloth?
I think in this world that is true. And then, that is my belief about this world.
And do you believe it's only 1-to-1? Or once you bootstrap it, can you replicate that same consciousness 50 times to make an army of 50 conscious people?
I think then you can replicate in perpetuity, and this movie just didn't do it because the movie hasn't fleshed out its world at all and decided it went for the metaphor of imperialist wars so hard that it was like, oh, forget the AI thing. It's fine. We started with AI. Now let's just do our thing. Because 100%, I think in this movie, once you've replicated it once, you could replicate over and over and over and over again. Just like you mentioned, consciousness transfer exists in this movie. You could do that 50 times. You could keep doing that until you get the information you want. But the movie doesn't want that to be true because the movie wants to be able to have stakes. And yeah, I don't have a good argument for why they don't just replicate things over and over again. But I do think bootstrapping in this movie is the only way to achieve real AI.
Okay, interesting. You know, maybe in 3 weeks we're gonna have a director's version of this. The director's cut come out on iTunes, and we can watch it and be like, "Oh, yeah.
You mean when you finish editing?"
Yeah, when I finish editing this. But
to those new to the show, we have a joke that whenever Christopher finishes editing an episode, they release it on iTunes that day.
Yeah. When I didn't edit it in real time with when we recorded it. If I ever fall behind. When I get around to releasing the episode, it happens to coincide with a Tuesday release on iTunes, like the very next day of the actual film coming out for everybody to watch.
But now you've upgraded. Now you're targeting the laser and firing the missile all at once. You can do everything at the same time.
Yeah. All right. One more thing to bring up, Steven. I feel I'm skirting the line, but I think this technically counts as non-spoilers. The Americans in this story, they have this ship called Nomad, which is like whatever, I forget what the acronym stands for. It's like, I got it here somewhere. The North American Orbital Mobile Aerospace Defense period, I guess, is what Nomad stands for. But they have this giant ship that can do orbital bombardments, right? They can, if they find a target, they can go full on ID4 and just blow that target out of the sky or out of the ground, I guess. As I'm watching this film, I'm like, it seems scary, seems deadly. I was like, does no one else have ships? Can no one else fly to space? Like, shouldn't someone just fly a ship to it? Like, we never see a scene in this film about what defenses that have. We see its offensive capabilities. It's basically a Death Star on some level, and it finds a target and it just blows the shit out of that target. But we don't see, like, it doesn't launch TIE fighters. If anybody flew something towards it or fired a missile at it, it doesn't seem like it could really do anything to stop that from happening. And I'm like, okay, I guess I can accept that in this world, in New Asia, there aren't flying things that can go to space. It's just all terrestrial crafts that maybe can fly in the air, but can't actually fly into the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. Then we're fucking introduced to the fact that there are lunar space stations and that there are regular shuttles that go back and forth from New Asia to the moon. And I'm like, so there are ways to go to space. Not only is it easy, but it's readily available and happens constantly every single day.
We'll talk about it.
And there's no TSA apparently.
Yep.
So I was just kind of like, okay, what the fuck?
Yeah, we will definitely talk about it.
Okay, we can get into it in spoilers.
Yeah. My only other non-spoiler thought here is that I feel like when I zoom out, the big story this movie is telling, I understand. And I even like the idea. I like the broad strokes of the story. I like what it's doing. I like what it's doing with the Gemma Chan character Maya and what she means to Joshua, John David Washington's character. I like what it's doing with Alfie. I get it. I enjoy it. When I think about any specific beat, for instance, Nirmata, the importance of Nirmata, I struggle to think of any time in the movie until the moment they want it to be a reveal when I am made to care who Nirmata is, when I believe anyone else cares who Nirmata is, when I believe it matters what Nirmata does. I feel like everything about this movie is just built toward reveals, but then it isn't doing anything to bolster those beforehand. And that is the weird thing about the movie, is like, in hindsight, I can piece together a total story. But from moment to moment, I was never feeling stress or wondering what would happen next because the movie wasn't giving me anything to wonder about. The movie was just waiting for the next reveal to happen to me. It felt much more like I was playing a video game than like I was watching a narrative.
Going back to my point earlier about even showing the title card with Nirmata and its definitions, imagine taking the script of this film, going back in time, taking the script, selecting all, doing a Command F, type Nirmata, hit, Command Return to select all at once, and just type the creator every time the script says Nirmata, and just have characters yelling, get to the creator, take her to the creator, go to the creator. This film, so many of my problems with it are fixed. Just because now it doesn't mean anything. Now it's just people referring to the person that created something. Like it just feels weird. Like even your film isn't called Nirmata. You could have made this movie called Nirmata, but no, you made this film called The Creator. And to me, Nirmata doesn't mean shit. Like it doesn't have any significance to this specific story. It doesn't make it more meaningful than just saying the creator. And in fact, it makes it less stupid to me. And I think that there's not really a benefit to, at least in the American release of this film, to not just have the character screaming that, because when they suddenly change from yelling everything in English to saying this one word that's not English, it just feels like it doesn't actually add any significance to the meaning of those sentences in a way that makes it worth trying to add the significance by showing a title card, explaining what the definition means, and then having characters yell it with significance that doesn't exist. But that may be a weird statement for me, but
I have a little point in spoilers against that, but I mostly agree with you. Though I will say, if everyone's running around saying get to the creator, that would feel even more like a video game than it already does.
All right, fair enough.
I feel kind of bad for being so negative on the movie because I am genuinely, believe me when I say I am actually torn about this movie. There are things that I celebrate that I'm so excited for. I want a million movies to look like this in the future. There are things I really, really love about it, and I am not plot hole guy usually. I have a high tolerance for that stuff, but this movie was just so close to being fantastic, and the way that it fails to be that makes me want to grade it on a curve of what it could have been, and what it could have been was just so damn good. And so I think I'm inherently very critical because I just feel like you were right there, you were so close, you could have had it all, and instead, I don't know, we get this thing that is just like kind of a husk of a narrative, and that is a shame to me.
Yeah, there are other AI films that have come out in the last couple of years that we have watched that were, way lower budget, looked like they were way lower budget, had some weird acting choices in them. But you're like, oh, the idea of this is so interesting. I believe in what it's going for. And it elevates above the schlock that exists with what you're watching. And it's like you're grading it on the opposite curve, right? You're saying that okay, so this is a little cheesy, it's a little weird, but the ideas here are so strong. that I like want to really celebrate this film, and I'm proud of what it achieved, right? Like I'm like, yeah, I like that film because it was interesting and it did all these things. This film is starting so far up just in visual presentation of what it's doing that you're like, shit, this film is awesome, and you're like, oh shit, it makes zero sense, and a lot of this is silly, and man, you were doing so good for like 30 seconds. And then now every single thing that happens, I just go like, now I have to, it's like you elevated yourself by your presentation of your material, that your material couldn't stand up to what you're visually presenting. And now it makes me want to criticize every single choice that was made about any of it. And it's like, it's weird that those two films, like this film and what was the other film? You know, the one that I'm talking about, the Artifice Girl.
Artifice Girl, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like if you compare this and the Artifice Girl, it's like there is no world in which I should enjoy the Artifice Girl more than I enjoy this film. But I do. It's like, it's just weird that those two films can even be like pointed at each other as like films that like one, which feels like it's barely able to achieve what the other one is doing, is doing it so much more interestingly. But yeah,
I mean, this is why talking about movies or applying a ranking to movies is so hard and fraught and kind of silly, because you inevitably grade it on the curve of how you feel about it, what it could have accomplished, how well it does that. And there are things like the acting was cheesy, but it tickled my brain, therefore I adored it. And there are things like, wow, this was beautiful, a work of art, and yet it was hollow and it frustrated me so much. Wait for rental. And there's just no real rhyme or reason to it. But I will say, too, to this movie's credit, it not only does it look beautiful, like the creator, I also think in broad strokes, like the way he wanted to tell the story, like when I squint and kind of see the shape that he's going for, I also love it. Like there's a lot about this movie I love. I love the idea of mixing futuristic AI and sci-fi with kind of old school gritty war realism. I love the idea of like imperialist America as an analog for humans versus AI. Like there's a lot of ideas in this movie too that I really, really, really like. But it's weird to say it doesn't take the big swings, because this movie is one big swing, but I feel like it doesn't carry one idea far enough for me to champion it based on the idea. There's something about it wants to be too many things at once, and that kind of makes the emptiness feel a little bit more overt to me. I don't know. I'm kind of faulting it for trying to do too much, but I don't know. It's just how I feel.
Speaking of some unintentional problems that were like moments where I almost unintentionally laughed out loud, but I was able to keep it in, is there's a scene where John David Washington is talking to Alfie, right? And they are talking about, basically she asks, what is heaven? And he said, it's a big place in the sky. Meanwhile, there's this giant nomad ship in the sky that's just flowing up.
In the trailer, I fully believed that would be intentional. And then the movie doesn't really seem to do anything with the obvious parallel between heaven as exists and the actual destructive thing that is the closest thing to what you call heaven.
It's like heaven, but also Elysium.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, this movie is indebted to so many things, and I'm sure, I haven't read an interview with Gareth Edwards, but I'm sure he would quote many of them too. Like, in, Apocalypse Now and Blade Runner, but then also very much District 9 and Elysium. This movie is clear Ex Machina. Like, even just the visual of the robot with the face,
just
then
the
from
face
behind you have the metal. It's so Ex Machina, which is fine. It's totally fine to copy from all those things. It's not as good as all of them in terms of story. Even Elysium, I thought the story was stronger, and I'm not like the biggest fan of that movie.
Yeah, I think most of us aren't.
Yeah.
I am a fan of those medical bays, though. If I could get one of those, that would be super awesome.
Oh yeah.
All right, Steven. Are you ready to delve into spoilers?
I'm ready.
It's been a while since we have a spoiler segment, so this can potentially be pretty exciting. But for now, before we get to spoilers, we got to tease everybody for a little bit. We have to give verdicts, and we have to say goodbye to all the people who aren't going to stick around for spoilers. So Stephen Miller, if you were going to give us a must-see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
My actual rating is wait for rental. I honestly think this movie is just right in the middle because there's things I adore, and things I really can't stand. But in terms of me recommending what you do, I have to say recommend with a caveat, because I recommend you see this movie. I want this movie to make a lot of money. I think visually it is such an impressive feat. I think it's something you will enjoy watching. I think you should do it. The caveat is I do not think story-wise or tonally or emotionally this is a very good movie. So it's a huge caveat. It's a caveat. I recommend it even though I think it is like fundamentally deeply flawed. And yeah, I hope this is V1, and like Alfie, it has the potential to just get better and better over time as more people try to iterate on it. Because I hope this is the alpha of a future of sci-fi movies with, I shouldn't say mid-budget because 80 is pretty, this isn't like a $20 million comedy or something like that, but it is relatively mid-budget, and I would much rather we have 3 or 4 of these a year than one giant Marvel movie. So if there is a future where more of these get made, I think we are all going to be better off for it. But next time, please, please, please write a script that is more tight and has one clear point of view, and I don't know, just make it less of a kind of hollow narrative exercise.
Yeah, I mean, like, if there was a Creator 2 announced today, I would probably still technically be excited for it, even though I would have zero confidence that it wouldn't be this again. But yeah, as Steven said, like, we do want to encourage this type of film to be attempted. Just want to encourage it with we want to encourage it with a little better effort put into making a story that actually grips you. Like, when I think about this film in the future, I'm gonna be like, shit, I kind of want to watch that again, but not because anything from the story holds on to me, but just simply because I just want to visually watch it again. I interestingly enough, I kind of have the opposite trajectory of you. Like, in my heart of hearts, I was like, God damn it, I think I still recommend this movie, but I'm like, but really, I need to stay true and say that this is a wait for rental. But it's like, part of me wants to encourage it, but also part of me is like, I got a big projector at home. I can just rent this on iTunes when it comes out. Like, that's where you should watch it. If you have the ability to watch it big at home, you can still enjoy everything that's good about it. It's like, my initial reaction was like, man, that movie is so weird, but I still kind of liked it a little bit. But I think in reality, I'm still like, it was made for cheap enough that it's going to make its money. I don't need to push anybody to the theater to see this.
Yeah. I guess I would just, the difference between us, or maybe it's the difference, is I wouldn't say I kind of liked it. I would say I kind of loved this movie and also couldn't stand it. My internal turmoil, the amplitude is just so high in the peaks and the valleys for me.
Yeah. No. It's definitely... It's one of those things where, like, I wasn't actively detesting it as I was watching it, but the entire time I was like, this makes no sense. This makes no sense. This makes no sense. Oh, that was fucking cool. This makes no sense. It was like one half of my brain was being constantly visually entertained, and the other half of my brain was just making a list of the things that don't make any sense and being like, I'll deal with all that stuff later.
Yeah. Well, let's get to that list. But first, I guess we'll do an outro.
All right. For everybody who's not sticking around for spoilers, this is your end. This is the blue light coming down from the sky to let you know that your time is up.
Isn't it a funny troll that the joke about Marvel movies and CG goop is that it's always just blue lights coming to the sky, and then this movie that is like the total polar opposite of the Marvel goop is a blue light coming from the sky? I find that kind of funny.
Yeah. The real joke is Steven, do you think you could ever be snuck up on by a giant blue light that's visible from like hundreds of miles away?
I'm very bad at paying attention, so I actually believe I could be.
Oh my God, Nomad's here. Oh, anyway, Stephen Miller, for people who aren't going to stick around for spoilers, where can they find you throughout the week?
You can find me on all the social networks, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram at @SDavidMiller, or you can find my blog at sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherMillerLife.com, Christopher IRL at a bunch of places, including Mastodon.social. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com. where you get a bunch of back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. That music is playing now. It is going to fade up, and when that music fades out, we're going to be in full-blown spoilers. So if you haven't seen the creator yet, go off, find Nirmata, and come back when you're ready, when you've done whatever you were going to do. Anyways, see you in a sec.
I'll keep my eye on you. My trust you've yet to earn, but I am through supplying power to a fear of doom.
All right, we are back. This is spoiler territory. It's the after part of our review of The Creator. This is our area where we are pro robots, pro AI, and anti United whatever alliance of people who in the West want to blow up machines.
Yep.
Stephen, where do we want to hit first? Do you want to start with some minor spoiler nitpicks and then go into the bigger, broader ideas that it might try to twist us with? How would you like to start?
Yeah, let's just go to the bigger ideas and then hit minor nitpicks along the way. I feel like I want something juicy. I feel like I've been minor nitpicking for the last 45 minutes.
Okay, well, let's start with the big twist that in my head diminishes the reality of the twist that is trying to give us, which is, oh my God, you guys, his wife is actually Nirmata. We thought it was his wife's daddy, but no, his wife is actually Nirmata. That's crazy. Also, by the way, Alfie is, not actually your kid, but based on a design created while your child who died was in utero. So it feels like this was supposed to be this. We're all working to this thing. It's like, hey, you know that kid that you're begrudgingly running around because you hate the world because your wife and your kid died? Turns out your wife is still alive and your kid is still alive and the kid is with you the whole time. But no. We didn't want to do that because that would be too obvious. What if instead the wife is almost half dead, but kind of alive, and the kid that also did actually die when the wife almost died and is now half dead was just designed to be based off what that child would be at the age that the child is now, Alfie is now? Why? Stephen, explain why we just didn't go full on, your wife is alive and so is your kid.
Well, okay, so first of all, I think this is going to be like hackneyed because everyone says this about every movie now, but this movie is clearly about grief, at least partly, like his grief or whatever. And so the loss of a kid is important to the character's motivation. So I never believed that it was going to wind up that Alfie was based on a real child of his who was still alive that he was going to find somewhere. I assume that's what you mean, based on a child that is alive, because
the child isn't alive, though.
Obviously, Alfie, no, it isn't. But I assume that is the alternative that you would have wanted, because Alfie is a simulant. So how would the simulant be the baby of two humans? Right? It doesn't make any sense. So clearly, Alfie wouldn't be the child. Maybe
Maya's not full human. Think about that, Stephen. Like if the big reveal was because here's the thing. Stephen, we're watching a film. It opens with a title card that says Nirmata is a deity, right? Or at least looked at by machines as a deity. Why would the machines deify a complete and total human? It would almost make more sense if she wasn't actually human. She was at least partially some sort of simulant, and that he had married her thinking she was human. And because here's the other thing too, right? When we're introduced to Alfie, when everybody looks at her like, oh my God, they're making kids now, as though simulated humans can't be whatever the hell you want them to be. This film treats it as though like somebody invented a child robot. Can you believe it? So it's like, to me, it's like, what if this is like an actual Battlestar Galactica type of situation where it's like, wait, are Cylons and humans reproducing now? That's fucking crazy, right? But no, this film, it's like, and obviously that's been done before, so we don't care. But it just made me go like, why are you making all the illusions there, but you're actually putting a hard, fast line to be like, man, what if it was it's not your kid, but I mean, it looks exactly like your kid would have looked if your kid was this age. But that's because, like, wow, she was pregnant. She used that as the basis for the thing she was. It's like, why would she do all that work? Because she thought that kid was going to live, right? There's no way she knew she was going to get blown to hell.
Weapon. I'm not saying it makes sense, but first of all, I'm okay with, like, the layers of metaphor, the hard stop or whatever, because this movie, even though it doesn't go there very well, I think it clearly wants to confront his idea of what is a human and what isn't a human, right? And so he has this innate feeling for this robot, this simulant, Alfie, and he can't explain it. You even talked about it pre-spoilers, about why does he do it, and it's like, oh, well, he doesn't actually have a feeling for the kid. He just needs it alive so he can get to Nirmata. Yeah. But it's clear through his interactions that he does have a soft spot, and it's because there is some innate thing that recognizes his child in this, but then it isn't his child. It's a replica of what his child would have been. And I think the fact that it isn't his kid is important for what the movie thinks it's doing about questioning the nature of consciousness and reality, and why would he love this thing just because it's exactly like what his kid would be, but it isn't his kid.
But that's the thing, is the kid died in the womb. Mm-hmm. So this is just a kid that's potentially the age of what his kid would have been. 5 or no, she's older than 5, right?
I don't know ages, but I think she's supposed to be 5, because I think this is supposed to be that the robot is aging in real time, right? Like, I think this is getting more and more powerful over time, is this thing is actually growing and aging.
Here's my other complaint, Stephen. Mm-hmm. Why does the getting more powerful over time have to be tied to physically aging in a body? Because you could have a child robot that suddenly becomes Goku and it goes Super Saiyan and destroys all the machines. You know what I mean? Like, it's I don't get why.
Well, this bolsters my belief that in this universe, AI is not something that we have learned how to synthesize. It's something we have learned how to replicate from a human being. And so the idea of growing over time, it's almost like Nirmata has ported the idea of growth and the ability to grow up into an AI, and because AIs think differently and have these certain capabilities, when it grows up naturally, it is going to grow up expanding its power of clapping and turning things off or controlling them. So, like, again, I think this movie has a very, like, physically grounded belief in how AI and AI progress works, and it wants AIs to be tied to the same rules that govern people. It doesn't want the creator to have this super intelligence that knows exactly how to make it do the thing that they want it to do. So to me, that is a point in favor of the idea that double backflip is actually the movie's argument, because this is how they want the wedding to be. In terms of Nirmata, like, we talked about Nirmata as the creator being worshipped as a deity. In my mind, you already said it. Take away the word Nirmata. But you can keep the fact that it's being worshipped. Like, yes, AIs would worship the thing that created them. That is the, quote, God to them. Just like to us, the God is whatever we think created us, right? Yeah. Like, that is kind of like a classic thought that I'm sure many sci-fis have already delved into before. What's weird here is they have a Dread Pirate Roberts type of rule about Nirmata, where Nirmata is more like the Dalai Lama, where when Nirmata dies, someone else becomes Nirmata instead. And that doesn't make sense to me, unless the robots need, like, the AIs need the equivalent of a kill switch or something. And in this case, that means there is one person that you will unconditionally listen to, and that can pass from person to person, depending on who it is. I don't understand why the daughter of the creator would be someone that they worship as a god, but they do, because again, there are the monk simulants that we meet who clearly do worship her. So there is, like, a level of deity worship going on here.
Yeah, that's the funny part. It's like I don't know a lot about the Dalai Lama, but I'm pretty sure that it's not transferred to your child. It's right. It's just someone else.
The line of succession is random.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know that they believe the new Nirmata had to be the child of the old Nirmata, even though that's how it was so far. They are just saying, as long as Nirmata lives, we cannot have another Nirmata. And that's why he has to, like, pull the plug and relieve her of her misery. So again, it's kind of hazy what their rules are, but maybe it's because it has all this Southeast Asian visuals and monks and everything, in my head, it is tied to this kind of mystical idea of someone new out there will suddenly rise up and become Nirmata.
I figured it out, Stephen. Whoever makes the best robot becomes Nirmata. So the dad had previously made the best robot, and everybody's like, oh, Nirmata. And then she was like, wait a second, I'm going to make a baby robot that's going to grow to be the best robot. And then she became, it's like a, you know, like Mech Warrior, where you challenge the person in your clan and you become the leader of the clan if you kill them. It's sort of a variant of that.
Sure. Then to go back to the relative importance or unimportance of Nirmata, everyone takes for granted that you need to get to Nirmata because Nirmata is like the mastermind of the resistance or whatever. That seems to be the reason. Or maybe they want to get to Nirmata because they believe if you kill Nirmata, then whatever, you're the Highlander, you have the Elder Wand, like now they all will follow you.
If they kill her, then the child becomes Nirmata.
Yeah.
It all makes sense now.
Yeah. So John David Washington has been following her and marries her under deep cover. He really loves Gemma Chan. That is like clearly established in the movie. But he has married her under deep cover to get to Nirmata. We still don't know. Like, he was with her for years. And she was Nirmata. And he didn't know. Which means clearly Nirmata is not that important unless she had like this hidden life where she's communicating all this time with people and setting up master plans. It feels like, again, the movie doesn't really care about that, and I don't care about that all that much either, but it has set this up to be a big deal, and then its own plot kind of tells you over and over again, Nirmata actually isn't a big deal, it doesn't mean anything.
But I think that's literally what was happening, because in the flashbacks, when we see her building the baby robot inside of the thing that looks like it's straight out of Death Stranding, like she's clearly in some basement laboratory that he doesn't know about. Maybe when he goes to sleep, she steals his arm and his leg. And then knows that he won't come looking for her. Steven, you reminded me of something a second ago when you said kill switch.
Sure.
You know, I don't know if we're ready for small nitpicks, but I wrote it down and I wanted to get this out before I forget about it. Steven, can you explain the difference to me between standby mode and sleep mode?
No, I think they're the same.
Because apparently simulants can sleep, which is what I would call standby. But then if you twist something on their neck, it puts them into standby mode, which is not off, because off is dead. So you turn left, off, dead. Turn right, standby. Sure. How can you sneak up on a sleeping robot who's not in standby already?
Let me explain using an analogy that you would understand. Your iPhone has an optional feature called raise to wake or raise to turn on the screen, right? But you can turn that off, and then it has to be manually clicked in order to turn on the screen. In this case, when a robot goes into sleep mode, it is going into a mode where it could wake itself up, right? Like its network is still available. It might be waking up to alert you of a new message that it's gotten or things like that. But when it goes into standby mode, then it is manually triggered, and then you have to wait for someone to manually turn it on. So it makes sense to me that it could exist. Now, I don't know why they would just have that right there if they want to be a lethal killing force. That seems like a pretty bad Achilles heel to me. But that is the argument.
All right, one more question. And this is my ignorance. I should have Wikipedia'd this beforehand. Can you explain to me how EMPs work? Does an EMP not hurt a machine if the machine's in standby mode? Does it only not destroy electronics that are currently passing current through them?
I don't know how EMPs work, but in my headcanon of how movies want them to work, it's that they disrupt active electromagnetic interactions, not the underlying hardware behind them. So if something, like let's take your computer, right? If your computer is on and an EMP hits it, because all of the machinery is active and it's like, sending bits back and forth. If it is suddenly being corrupted by this thing that is nuking everything and flipping all the bits to zero, then you're screwed.
Okay.
If it's off, then arguably there's no current going through it anymore, and maybe the current is the thing that is being manipulated.
So it's kind of
so in this,
it's kind of like how
I don't think that's how it really works. By the way,
yeah.
no scientist, please correct me. I'm sure this is not the truth, but in this world, when a simulant is in standby mode, it is essentially powered off in that nothing is running. So anything you blast to try to kill it, disrupt its basic functions, hasn't hurt anything because it's already been cryogenically frozen or whatever. Like, it's powered down. It's ready to be woken up again. Whereas if you suddenly, if you don't safely boot down a machine, then it might be corrupted and you can't turn it on. But again, the degree to which simulants follow the rules of human beings, and if they die, they just quote die, this movie has not thought through what that means or why that is true at all. As referenced by, and now I'll go back to another nitpick, you mentioned the consciousness transfer in this movie. There's a thing I really liked that this movie does once, where there's a character who has died. He's been dead for a while, so the signal is very weak in his brain. And Allison Janney basically pulls out this thing that transfers his consciousness to another simulant instead, who wakes up and has this horrifying 30 seconds of being the last gasp of, oh my God, I'm here. Wait, I'm dying. I can't believe I'm dying, and having to come to grips with the fact that they're dying all over again. That's all fun. But again, if consciousness is digital, she could reproduce that 100 times and have 100 people do that and preserve it until she gets all the info she needs. This movie has not thought through any of that at all. And it went from me loving it to me being annoyed by it very quickly.
So, Stephen, if I can backflip for you again, I think it is infinitely reproducible. However, when you already have the weakest possible signal, when you make a copy of a copy, that signal degrades over time. So they had enough.
Yeah, that's not true for digital things.
I mean, this is a digital analog connection.
Mm-hmm.
See? Think about it, Stephen.
Yeah, okay. No, so it's similar to its theory of simulants needing to be one-to-one mappings of human beings.
Yeah.
Even consciousness is just like an analog signal that it's doing like a digital compression of or whatever.
Yeah. Also, I liked it better when it was called The Discovery.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, another question, Stephen. Let's pretend that I thought the whole Nirmata thing was cool. Let's pretend like I thought it was cool that Maya was Nirmata. Let's pretend that I'm in this story and I work for the U.S. I'm trying to kill Nirmata, who I know is Maya. Do you think it would be smart for me to fill the one ship I don't want Maya getting on with simulants that are based off Maya's appearance? Does it make sense that I would have an entire bay full of Mayas just chilling up there on my ship, that one day she, the one enemy who's trying to destroy my Nomad ship, might board, possibly, and now there would be a whole bunch of them. How do I know which one's her? Because they could all be her. What,
yeah.
Who's... I get thematically why John David Washington would want to meet up with Maya after Alfie copied Maya's consciousness from the coma and put it into the bot so she could have 8 seconds of one last kiss before everything blows to hell. But why would you put replicants of the enemy's god on your ship?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm going to be honest, because I wanted us to, and maybe we still will, go into nitpicks about the ending of this movie. I feel like I just kind of turned off my brain and blacked out for the last 25 minutes of this movie.
Wait, hold on a sec. Did you sleep, stand by, or off your brain?
I think it was stand by, and then you pinched my neck when the movie was over, and then we got up and left. Because I remember plot-wise what happens. They want to kill Alfie, turn Alfie off. John David Washington puts her in standby instead. When she's being transported to a place, he turns her on again, or something happens that turns her back on, and then they escape. They board the ship that happens. I don't think the ship is bound for Nomad, but like it's bound for space, and then they
it's bound for the
ship.
lunar colony. They basically they arrive at the airport, run through security, quickly get on board a ship on its way to the moon, to one of the lunar colonies there, and then they redirect the ship in flight and basically take it hostage.
Right. Yeah. So they take it hostage. They get to Nomad, which is surprisingly very easy to do. I mean, I understand Alfie can manipulate electromagnetic waves, and maybe nothing in history has ever done that before. So this is like a special new way of entering, but it seems pretty easy, at least. Like they just like go up there, they do it. Alfie temporarily stops Nomad from dropping bombs, doing anything. It is frozen in place just long enough to... I'm not really even sure what it is accomplishing, that it has been turned off for a while, but she turns it off for a while. People freak out about it. A single mine or grenade is put on one of the missiles that is kept at bay. And that is timed for like 10 minutes for reasons that I don't understand. And then my mind just goes blank, and people are running around, and things happen, and Maya is there, and she's reunited. And I lost the ability to follow what the movie was doing, because it just felt so muddy of an ending to me, where it's just like, this is the grand operatic finale. Okay, I guess it's the pincer movement is happening now. I'm just going to accept it and move on.
Was that a dig at Tenet?
Yeah, John David Washington just doesn't know how to end movies.
Yeah. So I think you got all of it, Steven. I mean, that's basically all that happens.
So I was awake.
Yeah. You were awake. I think at least in Independence Day, they were in an alien ship, right? The mothership guided that ship back to them. It wasn't like they snuck on board the ship. It was like, oh, come in, my long-lost ship that I haven't seen since 1942. But in this, they just fly up, they get on, everybody's like, oh my God, what do we do? How do we stop anybody? I want to talk about this ship for a second, Steven. Let's pretend that you and I are, we're collectively PMing the Nomad ship, right? We are going to build this crazy ship that'll allow us to destroy any enemy base on the surface of the planet. We're going to arm it with a bunch of what are essentially shuttles that are packed full of some sort of warhead, and we're going to be able to target anywhere on the planet. Do you think that like it would make more sense for us to A, build a ship that can only load one torpedo at a time? Or since we have a giant ship, should we just have a bunch of torpedo bays, one for each of the missiles that we want to fire, and have it where, like, if we want to destroy all the bases at once, we can hit a button and have them all fire instantaneously instead of fire one at a time by rotating it into the launch tube and firing from there? What do you think would be the best method for our death-destroying ship?
I think probably parallelism is always helpful in things like this. Leaves you not having one single point of failure in the event that you need to get something done. But I don't know that there's only one torpedo bay, or that we're only looking at one torpedo bay and there are many torpedo bays out there.
I mean,
I'm not sure.
There's clearly not, because we watched the sequence where he's hanging onto the last torpedo, and it's one by one rotating the entire line of torpedoes down. Like it's like chain-fed torpedo bay, where it's like one fire,
right,
the next one fire, and it's like, oh my God, will the 10 minutes end before his torpedo gets to the torpedo bay and gets launched? It was definitely like a weird thing that I was kind of like, couldn't you just fire? And then here's the other part of this question, Stephen. Should we have to put the ship directly on top of the target, or should we make it so the missiles that we fire can just go anywhere on the planet that they need to go? How would you like to design the ship?
I don't want to, because I am on the side of the simulants. But no, I mean, the whole design makes no sense.
But at the end of the film, they're targeting multiple bases at once while only remaining over one of the bases, which means in the initial scene where they bombed Nirmata's hut, they could have just blown that shit up instead of having to storm the base and lost soldiers. And it would have been an actual sneak attack instead of having a giant blue light go all the way across the entire ocean slowly at like 1 knot per hour.
The moment toward the end where they just decide to bomb every enemy combatant at the same time doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense geopolitically for me, because if they could have done that all along, I need to understand why they have refrained. I have not seen any kind of political propaganda that shows them looking like the good guys. I haven't seen any examples of blowback that they've gotten for behaving negatively at enemy bases before. Everything they've painted of them is they are the evil galactic empire who will stop at nothing to root out all enemy combatants. So I don't know why they didn't do that to begin with. I don't know what they're hoping to accomplish here. I guess just like one last gasp before Nomad goes down, because they take it as a given now that Nomad is going to go down.
Yeah.
And yeah, the design is stupid. I still don't even remember, though, in my head. This is where my brain turned off. Alfie uses her superpowers to stop Nomad. Right. She stops it for a period of time. She's actively doing it. John David Washington is on a torpedo. So are the torpedoes moving here or no? She stops
it.
And then she lets it start again.
Well, she stops it because it's the very last torpedo that he happens to be on, and she's able to stop it so it stays in the bay.
I feel like she stopped it first. That's what I don't get. I felt like she stopped it first, and that alerted all the people below to be like, screw it, we need to go into the something mode. And then she unstops it and lets it run. Because I remember it runs and they're murdering all these people, and I thought, like, why isn't she still stopping this? What else is she doing? What else is in her agenda today that makes her not?
She stops it, I guess, so he can jump onto it. And then she gets disrupted somehow and it starts again. But here's my real question about that scene, Stephen. So the soldiers have these rocket launchers, right? They're for some reason a rocket launcher that's time delayed. For me, when I fire a rocket, I want it to explode on impact. They have this thing that goes like dunk, sticks to a target and goes explode, right?
Right.
It's almost like a mini nuclear torpedo. And, the main villain gets hit in the back with it, and she claps her hands and starts doing robokinesis and prevents the bomb from exploding, right? And it's not until somebody like knocks her or almost shoots her or whatever happens, and then it blows up and kills the target, right? So she has the ability to affect the electronics inside of explosives. Rather than power down Nomad so that John David Washington can stick a bomb on one of the torpedoes, which is already a bomb, why wouldn't she just clap her hands on Robo, blow the bombs up manually?
Well, for whatever reason, I don't think she has the power to blow up the bombs. I think she can just redirect them. Now, why doesn't she pull an Air Force One and redirect the bombs back to Nomad? I don't know.
Yeah, or
I think that would be a lot easier.
Yeah, or since all those torpedoes are rocket powered, why not just fire all the rockets on all the torpedoes, even if they're stuck in the tubes, and even if they don't detonate, it would still, I would assume, push the ship down towards the surface of the planet, and it would have to figure out how to counteract that force, right? Like, I feel like, like, what if you couldn't launch the torpedo because literally it's out of fuel, right? Because she burned up all of the gas in all the rocket fuel.
Yeah, well, I just don't understand, unless maybe her powers are finite and she just ran out of power for a while. I just don't understand why she ever unfreezes Nomad, because we basically watch her at John David Washington's request, essentially, be like, okay, you're good, stop. And then we watch them just massacre untold thousands of simulants and human beings who are sympathetic to simulants around New Asia while they are finishing their mission, which could have been finished in that moment because it's just a grenade on a torpedo, and you can just make that detonate whenever you want. And so I don't understand any of that.
I believe they were coming through it's like at the end of Jurassic Park when the raptors are coming through the glass. I think it was like I'm here sitting down doing my clap hands on the little pad powering down the station, and oh shit, they're onto me, I better run. And I think that's why she took off. She can't clap hands and also run at the same time.
Okay. okay, maybe that is what my brain missed, is like the threat to her that made her have to stop for a while, because I just didn't see that. It seemed like she stopped and then everyone was, unable to get to her. And then it was part of John David Washington's plan that she would start again and the torpedoes would launch. And then he would have the one that he'd be able to grab onto. It just doesn't make sense to me, but it's fine. It seems like there are easier ways to destroy Nomad when you have those kind of powers, for sure. Like not even getting on Nomad, just redirecting a torpedo into Nomad, which, because apparently the power of a single torpedo exploding is enough to destroy the entire Nomad, because that is like its downfall at the very end.
Well, as I said before, they clearly built zero defenses, and they were the best defense is a good offense is kind of their methodology for how they built Nomad.
Yep. For one more nitpick, and then I might be running out of energy to nitpick. One more nitpick that I have is, so Alfie, it has been established by the movie that she is very powerful and will get exponentially more powerful as she develops over time. I know this because Sturgill Simpson, the character of Drew, looked inside Alfie's brain for 2 seconds and turned to John David Washington and said, she is the most advanced thing I've ever seen, and she is going to get exponentially more advanced over time. She will be able to control everything. That's just lazy writing.
Yeah.
There's no way that guy would know that. He's never seen this before.
Yeah.
How could he possibly know what it can do after 2 seconds of looking inside? It's just silly. There are a million ways you can tell you can tell the audience the stakes without having a character do that, and that just kind of took me out of it.
Yeah, it was kind of silly, because like it wasn't even like here's how you fix that scene. You plug a cable into the back of her head, and you have code go by on the screen, and he can go, I've never seen coding this impossible. Like, there's self-learning, blah, blah, blah. Like, you can techno-babble your way through it, but having him poke the back of her head and go like, oh, I've never seen this before. I mean, I know my girlfriend has whirling gears in her head, but I've never seen these kind of whirling gears. I've never seen a kid robot before. This is the most advanced technology I've ever seen. Like, I can't get in. Must be future tech. Like, it. I would have totally accepted just code running by on the screen and like a progress bar that gets to 100 and goes like, oh shit, self-learning super soldier.
Yeah. Okay, second question. Do simulants age?
That was what I was saying earlier. I don't think Alfie ages, but in your world,
but see, I think Alfie is I believe Alfie is the only one to age. That's my assumption, which begs the question, why did people make really old simulants?
Yeah,
they don't seem like they would be the smartest like people to use as fighters in your mission against.
Yeah, maybe we're missing scenes where they explain the organic part of the robot machines. Like, maybe there is some sort of thing where it's like once again, I think if I do my double backflips, I think that they are emulating old age purely because it is a sign of humanness and it is a reality of fleshy beings, and they want to emulate that as an aspirational thing, because life being finite makes life more important. Them being finite, even though they could be infinite, makes them be more human, and that's sort of the whole goal of that's what the creator created.
Sure, but they don't want to be human. They want to be what comes next, right? They want to be beyond human. I feel like that's the whole thing.
I mean, I don't think they ever say they want that.
Yeah, I guess it's only the humans that are doom and glooming about the idea.
Nirmata is the only one that wants to be something more than human. All right. We done, Steven?
Yeah. I was going to end on a joke about Alfie being taught the birds and the bees of like when your Nirmata and Nirfata come together, then they create them.
I was also trying to earlier on work into nothing's Nirmata. What's Nirmata with you?
Please edit out my laughter.
I don't endorse. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you in our next review. Bye.
Bye.